Hey ladies, it's Naomi Adu here, founder of One Authentic Heart and Christian business coach for purpose-driven female entrepreneurs. And I'm so glad that you're here and that you've downloaded your free training. You're here because you are no longer ready to listen to the obstacles and the lies which say that you don't have what it takes to build a business. You're here because you feel called by God for something more, but you just don't know quite what that is, and you just can't quite get past those barriers which sometimes hold you back. Those barriers like fear, anxiety, doubt, worry, and just that concern around really moving away from that safety net of what corporate jobs look like. I was a high school teacher for 7 years. So for pretty much all of my 20s, I taught high school from, age 11 years old students all the way up to sixth form, which were kind of 18-year-olds. And I really, really loved working with young people. I loved teaching. And so that side of things I'd found to be really, really positive. However, I always knew that I was made for more. I always knew that there was something else. It felt like teaching wasn't quite my thing, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what was. And so every single year as a teacher, and I wonder if you can relate, every single year as a teacher, I would get towards the end of the academic year and I would feel as though maybe it's time for me to hand my notice in and move into something else. But I just never knew what that something else was. I never knew what it was that I was going to step into, and so I played it safe. I stayed in my comfort zone, and I just trusted that God knew what he was doing, which he did because doors continually opened. In the final 2 years of teaching, I led an alternative education unit for students that had been removed from mainstream school. And I really enjoyed this challenge, and I felt like maybe this is it. But then soon again found myself thinking, maybe this isn't the more that I thought that it was going to be. Maybe this isn't what it is. And so I just found myself thinking, well then, what am I meant to do? What is it that I'm meant to do? And so my husband and I, who were living in North London at the time, we got a message from some friends of ours who were pastors at a church in Hounslow, and they were asking us to come and be a part of their staff team. Now, this for me felt like the green light from God, and I knew that this was God kind of moving me on and moving me forward. I'd thought it for 7 years. Is this me? Is this going to be the be all and end all? But I was never sure whether it was time to jump. I wanted to know for sure from God that this was the right move for me. And so when we got this job offer, and it was a part-time role, which I knew meant that I'd have time to finally work on some of those hopes and dreams of mine. I'd been a blogger for like 5 years, and I wanted to move that forward and progress with it, but I never had the time as a teacher. So working for the church part-time, I thought, right, this is it. This is finally my opportunity to begin to build and to grow what I would hope would become a business later on. And so things were looking up, things were looking super positive. And then I got a call into the head teacher's office, and essentially they were making me redundant. The role was no longer there. And even though I knew that I wanted to go and I was ready to hand in my resignation, I didn't want to be told that I had to leave, right? And I wonder if you've ever felt that disappointment, that kind of setback, those things which make you kind of shrink back and feel as though you're not quite adequate, you're not quite worthy of something. And that's how I felt. And it seemed strange because it was like I knew that I wanted to go, but I hadn't have wanted to be told that it was time to leave. And so I struggled to kind of really process that for a long time. I was actually working with the church part-time at the time, and a year in, still hadn't really done anything with my potential business, even though I had all of this spare time. In truth, I was just watching Netflix in my spare time because I hadn't processed this setback, this feeling of rejection. I was too nervous to build my business and to move forward because of all these setbacks, which I'm about to explore in this free training here today. And interestingly, I started looking at rejection and kind of why we process it in the way that we do. And neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman, along with another scientist, Naomi Eisenberger, have actually created a study. They conducted this study whereby they looked at rejection and what it does to the brain. And interestingly, what they discovered is that the same triggers that are kind of set off when we are socially excluded or rejected are actually the same triggers in the brain that are set off when we break a bone. And so imagine how that actually then does feel, and it kind of helps us to kind of understand a bit more about why rejection, disappointment and setbacks hurt the way they do, right? Because truth be told, rejection, setbacks and disappointment hurt. And so because of that, I felt myself not being sure that I was ready to move forward. And then to make matters worse, the role at the church, the role that I thought I'd be going in to do, which was to kind of set up this intern program, that didn't quite work out either. We didn't get the uptake that we expected to get. And so it meant 2 setbacks back to back. And so I was thinking, so what now, Lord? I know you've called me out of this, but then what do I do next? How do I move forward? And I wonder if you've ever been in that position. I wonder if you've ever had these setbacks and wondered how you're going to move forward, because it almost seems like it's one thing after another. And it was then that I decided, to be honest, to reach out to a coach. Coaching was never something that I knew about. Coaching was never something that I was even vaguely interested in, because I had no idea what it was. But I had just turned 30 and I was like, enough is enough. I need to know what it is that I can do with my life, but I don't know what to do with this blog that I've got, and maybe there's a way that I can move things forward with it. And I had lots of skills, lots of transferable skills from my career as a teacher, as well as some of the social media stuff that I was doing at church, along with lots of different skill sets that I had in a variety of things with technology and social media. But I never kind of pieced the things together and moved forward in the way that I have been able to now in creating a successful business. And so I reached out to a coach, and she kind of put me straight. She allowed me to realize the kind of God-given potential that I had, and it enabled me to step into the role that I have now, which is essentially to mobilize other women to do the same thing. Mobilizing Christian women to use their gifts and their talents to build a business that they love. And I help them with the tools to be able to do that. And so perhaps you are here because you have faced some similar setbacks. As you've listened to my story, you can relate. You can recognize some of those things that I went through myself, through redundancy and job disappointment. And perhaps there's other things that you're disappointed about, or perhaps there's other blocks and barriers and mindset mountains that you can't quite overcome to allow yourself to move forward. And so I just want to offer 3 tips here, which I just really feel will help you to move mindset mountains and build your business. And so perhaps you feel this call, this real burning desire to press forward and to build something which you know that God has put on the inside of you, but you just don't know how to do it. And perhaps those limitations are kind of holding you back. And so I've got 3 tips for you here. And tip number 1 is there is no normal. I don't know about you, but I wonder whether you've ever had those moments when you were growing up where someone asks you what you want to be when you grow up, and you just say whatever first comes to your mind that seems like a normal job. So for me, I literally said a teacher. However, I also said a nurse, and in my adult life I have had no desire to be a nurse whatsoever. But what happened is that it seemed like that was the normal job, that was the done thing. People just do those kind of jobs. They're teachers, they're nurses. That's what happens when you're an adult. And so I just kind of said that. And it kind of, I guess, perpetuated. And in the end, I did become a teacher, but I didn't know what it meant to know that there is no normal. And so that's my first tip for you. There is no normal. God has created you completely uniquely, completely intricately, intimately. He knows you by name. He knows everything about you, and he's designed you in such a unique way with such unique gifts that you have something special to offer the world. And that might be in a business building and in an entrepreneurial capacity, and perhaps that is you, and that's why you're watching this free training. That's why you've signed up, because there's something that's burning on the inside of you. And when you hear about building business, you feel like that could be you, and you feel like God could be leading you in that direction. And so I would just really encourage you to really pray, press into God, and ask, what is it that you would have me do? And don't think about the normal lines. Don't think about this whole idea of, what would you have me do, Lord? You know, should I be a teacher? Should I be a doctor? Should I be a nurse? But think about it in the wider scheme of things, knowing that there is no normal. God uses everything and anyone in such unique ways, and the world is ever expanding now with the power of the internet, that there is no specific normal and niche that you have to fit into. Break the mold. Be bold enough to step out and stand out and say, I'm going to use my gifts in this way. Because why not? God has created you in that way. So just step forward and be bold enough to recognize that there is no normal. And that is point number one. Point number two is, it's never too late to reinvent yourself. It's never too late to reinvent yourself. And by reinvent yourself, I don't mean that you suddenly put on a facade and make up who you are. But what I mean is, if you, like me, have trained in a job that isn't necessarily the same as the job that you want to move into or the business that you want to build, that doesn't mean that you can't do it. That doesn't mean that you can't do it. Actually, one thing that I really love that serial entrepreneur Dale Partridge says is, he says, what is true of your hands and your heart? And by that he's saying, what is true of your hands? So what are you skilled in? And I'm sure that if you're anything like me, the things that you're skilled in, the things that even you are trained and qualified to do, have inevitably led you to the place that you want to move into next, when that comes to, you know, building your business and creating that dream business and entrepreneurial journey that you want to move into. Those are the skills of your hands. What is true of your hands? You know, it's not to say all of a sudden you're going to learn something completely new and just completely dive in, completely unsure of where to go. Because I'm sure that if you're watching this, there might be that prompting and that sense of God directing you and leading you into this path of building business. So as you discern and as you go through that journey, think to yourself, what is true of my hands? What am I skilled and able to do? And how might that serve others? And he also says, what is true of your heart? What is it that really fires you up inside? What is it that you're passionate about, that you wake up in the morning and can't wait to do? What is that burning desire that you just know that you want to do? And for me, that is mobilizing people, mobilizing the kingdom of God to move forward in using their God-given gifts and talents. And by the grace of God, I now get to do that every day in my role here as a Christian business coach. And I want to know what's true of your heart. What's true of your hands, so the skills and the talents that you've got, but what's true of your heart? What are you passionate about? What really just gets you going and fires you up? And that's what I mean by it's never too late to reinvent yourself with this second point here. If there's something that's true of your hands and true of your heart that you know that has been burning on the inside of you for, you know, years and years and years, there's nothing to say that that isn't God-given. There's nothing to say that that isn't something which God has placed on the inside of you. So really cry out to him with that. Really test and see whether this is something that you are to move forward in. Because there is nothing like stepping into purpose where you know and you're empowered and you're kind of emboldened to just move into the direction that you know that God is leading you to. So that's point number two. It's never too late to reinvent yourself. Think about what is true of your hands and true of your heart. And if you feel like that is where God is leading you, then move forward in that direction. There's nothing to say that you should not be stepping into that and walking in your worth. So just do it. God's with you. The The word says that he goes before you and behind you in Psalm 139 verse 5, and that he hems you in. And that means that God is surrounding you completely. So as you discern and seek him for your next steps and for what it is that he would have you do, he's with you. He hems you in. So don't be frightened about stepping out, because actually maybe he's encouraging you to do that. Discern and trust that perhaps this step of faith is exactly where God is leading you. And that leads me into my third and final point, which is risks are okay. And with that, I just want to turn to scripture briefly. And you'll know from the book of Genesis in chapter 4 that Abraham, when he was called by God, he went to a place that he did not know where he was going. That's literally what scripture says, right? That he went even though he did not know where he was going. And it's documented in Hebrews chapter 11 if we look at verse 8. And it says, by faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. He went out not knowing where he was going. And that just showed his faith and trust in God. Now, in order to be in that place, he had to have a relationship with God. And so obviously, that's the initial thing that I would encourage. Get close to God, draw near to him, seek his face. Abraham and God were close. There was that sense of Abraham knowing God's voice, and therefore knowing that when God was saying go, he was to go because he trusted that voice. And so really seek God and know him. And if he is calling you to go, then take that leap of faith and go. Take that leap of faith and move forward, because risks are okay. You know, I sometimes feel like I wish that I had moved forward quicker and actually gone for the life and the business that I wanted to create sooner. And I know now that God obviously had other plans. However, we don't have to wait until we've been made redundant to build a business like I did. Don't wait until, you know, a disappointment or a setback happens. Perhaps that still small voice that's prompting in your heart and mind now is call for you to move forward and for you to go. And if you feel and sense that, then pray and ask God what it is that he's doing in you, and trust it and trust him. Trust him to move forward in what it might be that he has for you. And perhaps that is to build your business. Perhaps this is the time. As you're watching this, there is something that's stirring in your heart and mind, and you just think this could be time. This could be me moving forward and building my business, which is just so exciting. So those are the 3 tips that I have for you today in this training. There is no normal. It's never too late to reinvent yourself, and risks are